few days ago, after scrolling through Pinterest, I sketched up this cake-themed character design. Let's see if I can transform this into a sculpture despite having little to no experience with making fake food or even icing a cake. First things first, let's 3D model this character's head using Nomad Sculpt. After inserting a sphere and pulling down the front to form the chin and the jaw, I'm using the deflate tool to carve out two symmetrical eye sockets. Now I can put some eyeballs into place and use the tube tool to draw on her eyelids. When I 3D model faces, I find that keeping facial feature details minimal not only results in a cleaner 3D print, but it gives the model a much more cartoony final look, which I love. Nomad Sculpt's symmetry tool is also my best friend when sculpting faces like this one, as it would be nearly impossible to match everything up by hand. After applying some winged eyeliner, forming her eyelid creases, and giving her some ears, we can now draw on and extrude her hair using the mask tool. Now, all we need to do is repeat this same extraction method for the irises and pupils, add a wall mount hole in the back, and voxel subtract everything together, ready for 3D printing. About 5 hours later, this head has fully printed and can be removed from the print bed. If you're wondering why I print my sculptures at a very steep angle like this, it's mostly to minimize the layer lines across the facial features. Printing heads like this does increase the overall printing time and filament usage, but it's well worth it as there are now only minor defects that need to be sanded. And now that they've been smoothed out, we can spray the entire face with this 2-in-1 filler primer and get painting. After using my airbrush to coat the entire face in a pale skin tone, I'm mixing up some white model paint and slow dry fluid for her eyeballs. This combination of paint and fluid is perfect for filling in flat areas of colour, as it prevents clumping and peeling. To be honest though, this skin tone is so pale that it only took a couple of coats to get an almost perfect shade of white within her eyes. Now that her eyeballs have been fully filled in, let's mix up a light shade of brown for her hair. By the way, the paints that I'm using for this project are by the brand War Paints. I typically use Vallejo model paints for my sculptures, but after struggling with a few sheer colours, I've decided to try something new. Not sponsored by either brand, by the way, I buy all of my model paints with my own money. Okay, she's looking a bit less bald now, so let's fill in her eyes. Just like in my original plan, this character's irises need to be painted black. There's no real design-based reason for this, I simply like how dark eyes look when it's connected to the eyeliner. Speaking of which, let's paint that in now, which I'm actually pretty nervous about. Any wrong move with this black paint could result in a mistake that would be extremely tricky to fix, so I'm holding my breath to steady my hands. After painting on the rest of her eyeliner off camera, it's now time to give her some eyebrows. And although eyebrows are meant to be sisters and not twins, I want these to be as similar as possible, so I'm lightly marking them out with a brown pencil. I do not trust myself to paint these on freehand, so a light guideline like this is essential. And now, using this same brown pencil, I'm shading the creases of her eyelids, her nostrils, and the outline of her lips. As you can see within my original illustration, this character's lips are a deep shade of red. Now, I have no idea if this actually did anything, but I figured that painting a more natural lip base underneath could make the red lipstick look a bit more realistic, almost like the underpainting method that you would use on canvas paintings. Now, all that's left to do is to add some UV resin to her lips to make them extra glossy, and she is looking really cute. Okay, whilst this painted head fully dries, let's take a moment to build some lore around this character using Unveil, who have kindly sponsored this video. Unveil is a creative platform that allows artists, writers, and storytellers to showcase their character designs and build fictional worlds around them. After designing a character, simply upload it to your Unveil page and create your very own gallery of designs and artwork. Let's upload this cake-themed character to my Unveil page, give her a name, and add some lore and traits. With Unveil, the possibilities are endless. Plus, Unveil is proudly AI-free, anti-NFT, and run by a small diverse group of creatives, which is extremely reassuring as an artist in this day and age. So, with over 200,000 artists and 3 million monthly visitors ready to connect, follow, and like your ideas, click the link in the description to check out Unveil today. Right, it's now time to get to work on this fancy cake hat, but as much as I would love to bake a real cake for this sculpture, I do think that hanging a real piece of food on my my wall would be a bad idea. So, to prevent any hungry ants from entering my studio, I'm going to form this cake out of cardboard instead. After using an empty tape spool as a head circumference size guide, I'm measuring the width at the back and cutting a back panel of cardboard to size. Now we can stick this tape spool into place using some hot glue and begin to form the curved front wall of the cake. To do this, I'm working out the cake's height, cutting another rectangle of cardboard to size, and then peeling away the top layer of paper. This technique lets the cardboard sheet curl without creasing, significantly improving the appearance of the curve. By the way, thank you to ArisaMamer1 on TikTok for showcasing this cardboard trick. Now, after attaching this curved piece of cardboard to the tape spool and trimming down the back panel, we can use some more hot glue to add a lid to this box and trim away the excess edges. Okay, this is looking good, but before we can decorate this cardboard cake, we need to make these surfaces look a bit less papery. So I'm going to use some polyfiller for this. Although polyfiller is typically used for filling nail holes and cracks in walls, its smooth and slightly fluffy texture should perfectly imitate thinly spread icing. So let's give it a go and cover this cake-shaped box using a popsicle stick as a makeshift spatula, taking extra care to fill in any gaps. A few hours later, this polyfiller has fully dried and can be painted dark brown to match the chocolate cake within my original design. Now this added texture has made the cake look super tasty already, but there are still some important details that we need to make before we can start to decorate it. As you can see, this cake hat has been carefully decorated with various cherries and berries. So, to bring this selection of tiny fruit to life, I'm going to use some polymer clay. By the way, if you're enjoying my videos and you would like to see more of them, please consider subscribing. I wonder if you can hit subscribe before I mix these two colours together. After shaping the berries, baking them, and then allowing them to fully cool, we can start to create the tiny cherry stems using 3D printer filament and hot glue. Adding a blob of hot glue to the end of a piece of filament perfectly mimics the thicker portion of a cherry stem. These can then be superglued into place and the whole thing painted red. Now, these cherries already look pretty good, but there's another detail that I want to add for that extra level of realism. Just like the red lipstick that I painted and glossed earlier, I want these cherries and berries to have a candied glass-like finish. So, to do this, I'm mixing up another batch of the same tinted UV resin from before and coating each piece of fruit in a thin resin layer. Then, once fully cured using my UV lamp, each piece of fruit now has a perfectly glossy shell that complements this character's glossy red lipstick very nicely. Now that we have all of the components ready to go, it's time to start decorating this intricate cake hat using white foam clay as icing. Now, I have never done this before, but I want to somehow try and pipe the clay onto the cake. Straight out of the bag, foam clay is way too thick to fit through a regular piping bag, but adding some water to this soluble clay seems to make it a bit more pliable. So let's use a Ziploc bag as a makeshift piping bag and see if this will work. Okay, it's quite tricky to squeeze this out, but it's kind of working. Actually, this looks pretty bad. Let's peel it off and try again. I'm actually starting to think that this method isn't going to work, but let's give it one last go. Okay, back to the drawing board. Piping the foam clay is just way too messy and tricky, so I'm going to do this the long way and form the piped icing by hand. By rolling out balls of foam clay and adding fake piping tip lines, I can take my time to make each blob of this fake icing look perfect. This is the effect I was trying to achieve with that piping bag method, but I am just not skilled enough to do that. For the icing that sits underneath the cherries, I'm indenting some larger blobs of foam clay and then sticking them on top of the cake. Then, once the cherries have been pushed into place, the icing indents spread out exactly how I need them to. And last but not least, after aligning several thin strands of foam clay across the front and squishing the smaller red berries into place, this delicious looking cake is now finished. Before we can transform this cake into a fancy looking hat, however, there are a couple of finishing touches that we need to add to this character's face. For the beauty mark, I'm using a bit of brown paint and my dotting tool, and for the wispy lower lashes, I'm using some more strands of 3D printer filament. And I know, sticking these long long strands on and then trimming them down does look kind of crazy, but it's much easier to even out their lengths like this. Right, it's finally time to assemble this cake-themed sculpture, so let's stick the hat into place using superglue, add some extra icing to the bottom of the cake, and fashion this dark red papery ribbon into the hat's chin strap and bow. This strap might just be my favourite detail, as the colour of the ribbon and the bow really ties everything together. No pun intended. Okay, let's see how this sculpture has turned out. And here she is. We've successfully transformed this simple sketch into a finished sculpture, and I am in love with the result. Taking the time to hand sculpt the icing was definitely the right choice, as this extra detail elevates the design significantly. Plus, the UV resin gloss on the cherries and the lips worked so well. I should really do this more often. I'd also love to know what you think of this sculpture. Let me know in the comments below. A big thank you to Unveil for sponsoring this video, and a huge thank you to you guys for watching until the end. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you're enjoying my content. We are rapidly approaching the 100,000 subscriber mark. Okay, that's it from me, so I will see you in the next video.